you please turn your Bibles with me to Genesis chapter 22. Genesis chapter 22. In verse 1 it says, "And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham. And he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him therefore a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up, and went unto the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes, and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the axe, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come against you. One night a house caught on fire, and a young boy was forced to flee to the roof. His dad then opened out his arms and called out to his son, Jump! I will catch you! All the boy could see, however, was flames, smoke, and only darkness. The father kept yelling to his son, Jump! I will catch you! But the son protested and said, But Daddy, I can't see you. Then the father replied, But I can see you, and that is all that matters. After hearing these words, that boy jumped off the roof, and he and his father lived that day. When God asks you to take a leap of faith, it doesn't matter if you can't see what is happening. It only matters that God knows what is happening. Everyone has tests, but today, how are you going to respond during your test? Today, from God's Word, we are going to look at 3 ways on how Abraham responded during his test. First, I see Abraham's response. Abraham's response. In verse 1, it says, And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham. And he said, Behold, here I am. First, from God's Word, we see that Abraham's response was a positive response. Before this time, whenever God spoke to Abraham, it was usually a good thing or a miracle. And whenever Abraham spoke back to God, he said it in a good way, thinking it was a miracle. Not only do we see a positive response, we also see an immediate response. I believe that when Abraham spoke back to God, he didn't delay. He spoke back right away. I believe that he didn't say, Wait a moment, God, I'm doing this. Just give me a second. No. I believe that he just said, Behold, here I am. In addition to Abraham's response to God, secondly, we see Abraham's reliance on God. In verse 2, it says, And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I tell thee of. First, I see that there was a surrender in faith. Abraham had to surrender what was most dear to him, his son, his only son whom he loved. Does that remind you of something else? God the Father had to give his only begotten son for us, and Abraham had to give his son for God. This was a picture. Many scholars believe that Abraham went unto Mount Calvary to sacrifice his son, to signify a picture, so when Jesus would get crucified on the cross. Not only do we see a surrender in faith, we see action in faith. What if you were hanging off a cliff, and there was no one there to help you except for one man? And you called out to a man, what was his name? And he answered back and said it was Jesus. But what if Jesus told you to say, Do you believe me? You would probably answer back and say, Yes, Lord, I believe you. But what if Jesus told you to jump off the cliff? Would you do it? True faith requires action afterwards. In James 2, in verse 26, it says, For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. Faith requires action afterwards. Not only do we see a surrendered faith, or an action faith, we see an object in faith. Abraham somehow, some way believed that God's goodness was so great that his son would somehow raise up from the dead. In Hebrews 11:19 it says, Accounting that God was able to raise him up, even from the dead, from whence he received it in a figure. Basically, this verse means that God somehow believed, or or Abraham somehow believed that God would raise up his son from the dead. Besides Abraham's response to God, or Abraham's reliance on God, finally we see Abraham's reward from God. In Hebrews 11:6 it says, "But without faith it is impossible to believe him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him." God rewards the faithful. If you're faithfully serving God, if you're faithfully in his word, and if you're faithfully seeking him, he will reward you for that. First, I see that there was an innumerable reward. In verse 17 it says, "That in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of heaven, that is the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies." Abraham's seed from then on would be as the stars of the heavens and as the sand of the seashore. And not only did we see the innumerable reward, we see unfathomable reward. Abraham's reward would be what we call beyond what we can imagine. And from Abraham's seed, we get David, and from David, we get our Lord Jesus Christ, who would someday sacrifice his life just so we can live. Abraham passed the test. But what if Abraham didn't make that single decision? Would we have the Christ? So today, if God would put a test in your life, how would you respond to it? Will you make it an obstacle or an opportunity to get closer to God? Will you be an Abraham today?